Hi, good Bat Neighbor community. Jen here, and we've got our very special Friday feature for you today, our monthly feature, where we're joined from folks around the world who are helping bats. Joining us today from Elk Grove Village, Illinois, in the Midwestern United States is one of our very own good bat neighbors, Mikko Moy, a wildlife biologist. She's the administrative specialist at SWCA Environmental Consultants. So, hi, Mikko.
Hello, hello.
How you doing?
Doing pretty good.
All right. So, what is an administrative specialist at an environmental consulting company?
So before I explain that, I'm gonna take a step back and explain what I did before I became administrative specialist at SWCA. So when I first started with the company, which was back in 2017, I was a assistant staff biologist and I was a temporary employee at the time. So that meant that during the summers, obviously when bats are most active, and that's when the company had work, I would help participate in bat surveys. So whether it's doing misnet surveys or acoustic surveys,
Mm.
anything bat related, I was there to help them during the summers. While during the off season, like the winter and spring, I was actually helping with my family that owned a restaurant at the time. So I
Oh,
would
geez.
kind of, so yeah, so I would bounce back being a bat biologist basically in the summer, and then yeah, helping the family out during the winter and spring. So I did that for a couple years, just being an assistant staff biologist, helping with all the different bat surveys. And eventually, I wanted to be more involved with the company, and a position for admin specialist opened up. And so I looked into it, and basically it involved just helping with the day-to-day operations at the office. Um, so I took the opportunity to help or to apply for that job, applied for it, got it. And not only do I help with the day-to-day operations at the office, I help with the project managers if they have a lot on their plate and they just need an extra set of hands to kind of help with their tasks and deliverables for clients. I'm there to assist them. Um, and also, as admin specialist, I still help with anything bat related. So I help with like keeping track of our inventory, making sure that our acoustic detectors are functioning well. So still involved in the bat, in all the bat related surveys that we do, but maybe on the more like behind the scenes aspect of it. And if I can and I have time in my schedule, I'll also still go out and do bat surveys as well. So so started as assistant staff biologist, moved on to admin specialist, still very much involved in the bat projects that we have going on in our office.
Very cool. So, um, I guess I'll ask what made you want to study bats in the first place?
It kind of happened on accident, to be honest.
Oh,
So so yeah, so I guess I'll start in when I went to Purdue, which was literally 10 years ago. So
oh wow.
so I thought it was appropriate to wear a Purdue appropriate attire
Nice,
here.
nice.
Started or graduated at Purdue 10 years ago, back in 2014. And at the time when I was a freshman, I thought I wanted to be a veterinarian because I
Oh,
was interested in animals. I'm like, oh, what great career to help animals by being a vet. And
yeah.
then 2 years, so sophomore year, I realized I'm not cut out for this. I respect anyone that goes in the pre-vet track and sticks with it. But yeah, unfortunately, it was something that wasn't for me. And so if I had a friend that was in the wildlife biology program at Purdue, and she saw that I was kind of struggling with the current classes I was in. And she's like, why don't you sit in my classes and get a feel of like what wildlife biology is all about? And I did exactly that. I sat in a few of her classes and I was like, wow, like you guys actually like have classes dedicated to this. So they had like classes like dendrology, studying trees, systematics of birds, mammals, herps, fishes, forest
Nice.
ecosystems, forest soils. It opened up a whole new world to me. And so luckily, sophomore year, transferred into the wildlife biology program. And yeah, started taking those classes. And senior year, I was there taking summer school classes. And I got word that there was some sort of like that my mammals professor, Dr. Zollner, was doing a pilot acoustics study.
Oh,
And it involved basically comparing the differences of recording bat calls on a bicycle versus a truck. And
oh wow.
so he needed volunteers at the time to help with the studies. And so I was like, sure, why not? Like I'm here for the summer. I wasn't other than taking summer school classes and doing an internship at the zoo nearby Purdue. I was like, yeah, like why not? And so I learned how to record back calls and how to actually look at calls with computer software. programs to look at the different bat calls. And that's kind of where I caught the bug. And I was like, oh, this is like super fascinating. Um, and so, yeah, that's kind of how it all started. So it was, like I said, it was kind of like on accident. At the time of me being a senior, I wasn't sure exactly where I wanted to go with wildlife biology. One of the sort of obvious, I guess, paths is going into the zoo or the zoo career.
Right.
And so that's what I thought I wanted to do at the time, which is why I was interning at the zoo nearby Purdue. Um, yeah, so it was kind of just like kind of happened on accident. And yeah, and I just kind of fell in love with kind of recording back calls and seeing like going and then downloading the calls on your computer and seeing like what you got out there. So it's kind of it was a little addictive. So that's kind of how it all started. It was sort of just like, hey, I happened to hear about this pilot study that was that my maths professor was hosting, and kind of stemmed all there. And the interest never stopped.
It's funny how things just kind of happen to a reason. For a reason, I always hear people falling into things so much, and that's awesome.
Yeah.
I have to ask if it's not too long of a story. So,
No.
did the comparison go between monitoring on a bike versus a truck?
So, so basically, yeah. So from that study, we learned that like basically the biodiversity is would be the same no matter what. So ultimately, like if you were creating a project and you wanted to record backhauls like in some sort of natural area, and you just want to figure out like budget wise, like what's more beneficial for you,
Right.
you could kind of then decide like, hey, like we're gonna record backhauls like based on this budget, like what's more feasible for that project.
Nice. Very cool. I wouldn't have thought of doing acoustic monitoring on a bike. That's just that opens me up to new ideas. It's very cool.
Yeah, yeah. It's very interesting, especially when you're riding bicycles in the middle of cornfields and your imagination
Oh,
runs a little bit wild.
oh, geez.
So, so there is something. So there is a little drawback to doing a survey that way. So hopefully, whoever's doing that survey has a good sort of mentality and knows that everything's gonna be okay.
Yeah, yeah. I suppose you are out in the dark by yourself potentially in the middle of nowhere, so it could be a little interesting.
It could be a little bit interesting, yeah. But I
Yes.
mean, I will say I feel like some of the most interesting people you meet are people in the back community. So
Oh, definitely, definitely. All right. Well, let's see. I was wondering if what you do personally to be a good bat neighbor.
this is gonna sound so simple, but honestly, just like in my day-to-day life, if I could um like sort of like introduce myself as a bat biologist, it
Okay.
gets the conversation going. So it sounds very mundane to do, but a good example is that is like when I go like visit like my dentist, like when I was visiting my
Oh,
dentist for the first time, he was like asking like, "Oh, what do you do for a living?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm a bat biologist." And he's just like he like stopped everything. He's like, "A bat biologist, please tell me more." Like there's intrigue with strangers, honestly, about like what I do. And so just like casually introducing myself in certain situations as a bat biologist, I feel like is really helpful because people like at least from my personal experience like people have had like really positive like interactions or with me about it, and they want to know more and they're very curious. So like every time I see my dentist, he's always asking like, oh, what's like your latest bat trip that you've been on? And then he'll usually find someone else like in his office like, hey, like come meet this person, like she's really interesting. So
very
so
cool.
it sounds so simple, but like just like openly like sort of introducing like my profession in in situations where it's appropriate, not just like casually just like belting it out to the world, you know. But like little interactions like that, like with people that I see like maybe on the regular, and just talk about my profession, I feel like again opens up that conversation with people. So yeah, I feel like I think that's one of the more standout ways I've been able to educate basically like the public about why we should care about bats.
And that's so important. And it cracks me up actually that you said at the dentist, because I had the exact same thing happen. The first time I went and they're like, oh, what do you do? And I said, well, mostly bat education and outreach work. And they're like, what? What's that all about? So yeah, I want to stress to our audience, any chance you get to talk to especially strangers about bats, go for it. It's always amazing to me how positive the reception is, because it is such an odd thing for people to say that whoever you're talking to is like, what does that mean? What's that all about? So I'm
Yeah.
so glad you brought that up. It's just really perfect.
Yeah, I agree. And especially I feel like people's attitude, like especially like within the last 10 years in light of like white nose syndrome, like people's like attitude has changed around. And so when I talk to someone and they like mention things like, oh yeah, there's like this like this disease I've heard about going around bats that we should know about. I'm like, oh, so like you actually are like more well informed than like I thought the average person would be. So
Yeah,
that in a way just like makes me feel better. I'm like, oh, like the public actually has is better educated than like I would like normally would think
yeah,
versus like
yeah,
let's say like I don't know like 30 years ago when people still had the stigma that like bats are like awful and we should have like nothing to do with them, and if they're
right.
ever in your house like do whatever you can to like eradicate them. So
Yeah,
it's kind
yeah.
of so it's really great to see sort of like at least again in like my interactions like people's perception has changed quite a bit when it comes to how they view bats.
Since we have viewers in other countries and are probably not familiar with white nose syndrome, since it's really just something in the US and Canada, could you just mention real quick what that is?
So white nose syndrome, from my understanding, it's a fungal disease that's typically found in caves. So this definitely affects bats that hibernate in caves.
Right.
And so typically how it normally persists, from my understand, is it normally the fungus will persist in basically like the soils of caves or like in the guano. And so of course bats when they hibernate in caves are in tight quarters and next to each other. So they're just easily spread it amongst
Yeah,
themselves.
yeah,
And typically, and unfortunately, when they contract it, obviously, a symptom of it is they get a fuzzy nose, or they get the funguses growing like on their faces and their nose.
right, right.
But it also spreads like on their wings as well. And then obviously, it creates holes in their wings, and obviously, that's going to affect how they fly. But more
Yeah,
importantly, that's how bats maintain actually like their moisture is when they wrap their wings around themselves. So they're obviously getting dehydrated as well. So
okay.
um and yeah, so I believe it was first found in New York in 2006, and it's just been spreading from the East Coast to the Midwest. And I
Yeah.
want to say, if I remember correctly, and please correct me if I'm misquoting this, I think in like 2016, it somehow jumped the Rockies and then like was found in like Washington State. And so it's just like spreading now, not only from the East Coast and West Coast, or it's not only from the East Coast, but also from the West Coast and just
Right,
making
right.
its way in two fronts.
Yeah,
So
and I know even now Canada's had some cases too. So
yeah.
we need all those biologists to increase in number and get out there and work on stuff. So if you're looking for a profession, anyone, look into being a bat biologist. So,
And yeah, Fish and Wildlife for sure has funding for programs like that to help
oh,
combat white nose
nice.
syndrome. So it's definitely on their radar that to help yeah combat white nose syndrome. So yeah, there's definitely opportunities for sure, at least to get grants for it from Fish and Wildlife Services.
Right. Oh, that's fantastic. Nice, nice.
Hmm.
So let me see. I was wondering, what's your favorite bat? And it could be a species, could be a bat from a book or a movie, or it
I'll
could be a
get
bat
the
you've personally encountered.
I have two answers to that, and I'm gonna
Okay.
get the worst one, the one I think is worst out of the way. So I have a soft spot for big brown bats, which I
Right.
know like a lot of bat biologists like will roll their eyes because it's like they're the most numerous bat, like,
Yeah.
and it's like in terms of appearance, maybe not like the most I
Exciting.
guess exciting. Yes, that's the word I'm
Yeah.
looking for. Most exciting. But I think I just have a soft spot for them because obviously it was the first bat I got to handle when I'm doing a MissStat survey, but
Yeah.
by chance because they're the most numerous. But of all the bats I've handled, they're definitely the most feisty and have the
I'm not.
most personality. And so that's why I appreciate it. Like they're not afraid to put up a fight. Um, so if you're like a beginning bat biologist and you're doing
Mm.
MissStat surveys, like they're
Oh, right.
definitely, I feel like a great bat to like get to practice with because like if you can handle like a big brown bat, you can pretty much handle like any bat, and at least in like I feel like in the contiguous 48 states here.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so I feel like they're a great bat to like really like hone like your handling skills and whatnot.
Right. Right.
And so that's probably why I like them. And I think I also like them too because they're kind of like scoffed off as
Yeah.
like, yeah, like that's just like when you're
Always like
like
the
doing misset
underdog.
surveys, they're
Yeah.
like the underdog. So like that's so I guess just naturally have a soft spot for them. So
Yeah.
in terms of species, I put my I vote for the big brown bat. They will forever have a soft spot in my heart.
Nice,
So
nice.
favorite species, but in terms of favorite bat, I actually have a friend back here.
Oh,
I'm really into crocheting, and so I found
oh
this
wow.
cute pattern of this bat that I
Oh
created
my
here.
gosh. Oh, that is
Yeah.
adorable.
And so he sits on my little bookshelf back here. Um, but yeah, so this is like my favorite bat I could have
Wow.
all the time safely,
Nice.
safely.
Oh, that is
So
fantastic. Okay, I have
yeah,
another
so
suggestion for people. If you're not looking for a new profession to become a bat biologist and you're maybe looking for a bat hobby, you can crochet bats. That is something I would not have thought of. That's awesome.
it's a lot of fun. Yeah, there's a lot of cute patterns out there you could find. And so yeah,
That is so cool.
I encourage channel your inner crafting skills and yeah, go for it.
That's so neat.
Or if you like me to crochet a bat for you, I'd be more than happy to make one for you. Usually,
Oh gosh.
usually if there's a bat biologist friend that I know is like having a baby, I'll crochet them that because I'm like, we need to get your child integrated that bats are
Totally.
friendly and they're awesome and amazing. So what better
Totally.
way than to gift them
I
a little
think
bat?
uh I think the good bat neighbor community might need a crochet bat mascot if you've got some time on your hands.
Hey, I'd be down for that. You don't have to ask me twice.
That's awesome. Okay, everyone, stay tuned. We will have a crocheted bat mascot one of these days. We will feature him on the Facebook page. So, well, thank you so much for joining us, Miko. This has been really fun. And well, geez, good luck with all your work, and we'll keep following you and see what you're up to. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks, Jen.
And thank you everybody out there who joined us today, and we will see you next month. Bye.